Welcome back to More Than a Therapy Couch. I'm your host, Tiana, and today we're here tackling a topic that lies at the heart of every strong relationship: trust. Trust is the foundation of connection, but it's also one of the hardest things to rebuild when broken. Joining me is Demetra Gregorakis, a licensed associate counselor, to help us navigate what trust really means in relationships and how we can continue to nurture it, whether you're building it from scratch or looking for a fresh start. So grab your favorite blanket, your emotional support water bottle, and let's dig in. Just you, me, and a couch. Let the session begin.
As a reminder, the topics discussed are for educational purposes only and are not meant to be taken as clinical advice. If you are concerned about you or a loved one's mental health, consult a mental health professional or call SAMHSA's 24-hour hotline at 1-800-662-HELP.
So, Demi, thank you so much for coming on. Just so the listeners have some context, can you just tell us a little bit of your background working in this field and let us know a little bit of your experience specifically working with couples?
Yeah, so I would say that my experience isn't as conventional as probably the normal therapist. I started my journey a little bit later in life, but the thing I always knew was I loved stories and hearing people's stories and connecting with them. So my journey to get to becoming a therapist, I was actually in TV production for 10 years. I was in the city working, news reporting, all these things, and something felt missing for me. So I applied for a master's program at NYU and I got in, and I said, since I got in, I'm going to go and become a therapist now because there's something that felt like I wanted to do more. And in regards to couples, I love love. Love is my favorite thing. And from a young age, I was always fascinated with why people chose or choose who they are with. And I think there is something fascinating about why people get married, why people get a divorce, why do we stay in toxic relationships, why do we maybe, compromise our own values and morals to stay with somebody. There's so much that goes into it, and I'm fascinated by it. So when I work with a couple, it's not just about the dilemma. There's so much story, so much history, and to be a part of that to help them kind of, I'll say, sift through all the stuff they're holding, it feels like it's an honor for me, honestly, because it's hard already to have that vulnerability. But for me, I've had a great, I'll say, background because I had a really amazing foundation when it came to my mom and my dad and seeing a healthy relationship and what that looks like and what that takes. But when it comes to my practice as a couples therapist, I'm a very open and honest therapist. So I think some couples are a little bit, I'll say, taken back when they first meet me. And I always tell my couples, I'm like, listen, this is kind of how I approach things. We may be a fit, we may not be a fit. And I always think it's so important to preface that in a session because you want the client, the couple, to feel comfortable to know I can come back maybe the next session or 3 or 4 sessions and maybe we're not a fit because you're not going to be a fit for everybody. But I want them to feel comfortable then to kind of say, hey, this isn't working for us. Or, don't tell me, tell the front desk, call us up, whatever that looks like. Because the space is sacred and the time is really important, I think, to utilize properly. And so I don't want to be a barrier in that as a clinician. So I think it's always really important to know that personalities with your therapist is really important. So for some couples, I might be a great fit. For some, I might not be. But I always say that reveals itself in time once we build that foundation and build that rapport. But to answer that shortly, I love love. So I love working with couples.
That is amazing. And I think it takes a certain type of therapist and I think even a certain type of person to work with couples because couples can be very hard. And I admire your take on that because I feel like some therapists are like, well, couples are really challenging and I don't want to work with it. But I feel like you're like, I want to know that challenge. I want to know what makes things so hard in your relationship. And let's talk about that. Let's discuss that.
Yeah, the thing about I think approaching couples therapy is recognizing, especially from a clinical perspective, as a clinician, it's your duty is not to two individual people. The relationship is the client. And sometimes it feels overwhelming if you start focusing on one person over the other because it's not individual therapy. So you have to really ensure and recognize that your goal as a clinician is to that relationship. But I do tell my couples, some days you might love me, some days you might hate me. Some days you might feel like you're being a little pushed a little bit more or that I'm taking aside. But the thing is, it's not that way. I always try to slow down in a session if someone's feeling that way, because if I'm kind of, I would say, focusing in on one partner in the couple versus the other, it's because I'm seeing something. I'm seeing a pattern. I'm seeing a behavior that maybe is continuing, that's adding tension to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, I'm going to probably press a little bit more. I'm going to kind of ask you to uncover that. But with couples work, you have to be ready for it, because you have to ask yourself in the dynamic with your partner is, if we go and seek out couples therapy, am I willing and ready to not only work on us in the relationship, but also on myself? There's so much individual work that happens in a couple setting, because the mirror is kind of shown to your face. There's going to be things that you do, not just your partner, that adds tension, that's maybe a little bit toxic, that's not the healthiest thing. And you have to be able to kind of step outside of your ego and recognize hey, we're here to work on this relationship. So that means I'm going to have to be accountable for certain things that I bring to that relationship. So I also say that mindset for couples is so important. If you don't have the mindset that we're going to work on this, then maybe it's not for you at this time. Because if you're not both in the boat together, we're going to have a hard time working on it. And I think that's something that I really preface. And I always ask for sessions listen, you might not be sure if you want to continue this relationship. That's fine. I can work with uncertainty, but are you willing though, week after week, to kind of put in the tools that we talk about and try to change certain patterns and behaviors and to work on the homework that we discuss? Because if you're willing to do that, that's all I need. And everything else in time will reveal itself. But what you just need is two people who are willing to work on it. And the rest, clarity will be gained.
And I think it's one thing that's really important for the listeners to understand is therapy is not always fun. You don't go to therapy and you're like, I'm going to leave and be all happy. And that was, oh my God, such a great session. And sometimes it may be, but it's not always going to be like that. It's going to feel like work at times. And I think that's the whole point of therapy. You're seeking out therapy because you are unhappy of something in your life and you want that change. And if you're going to get frustrated with your therapist kind of challenging you, then maybe therapy isn't the best thing for you. And there's a lot of other ways where you can kind of help yourself. Therapy is just one of them, but you have to recognize ahead of time that you will be facing some hard things to swallow.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing coming off of that point, which is a really good one that you make, is that you go to therapy and with your relationship with your partner maybe once a week, right, for 50 minutes, and you're in this room. But the thing is, a lot of therapy that people maybe don't recognize is not just talking, it's doing. So there is a lot of talking at first, right? We are uncovering. We're not just running and trying to change all these things. But the thing about longevity of therapy, if you feel like you're not making any improvement, any progress, there has to be, again, some kind of introspective of hey, am I actually enacting these changes outside of therapy? Because for the 6 other days, you're in the world by yourself without your therapist. And we're here to support you and guide you. But there's a big factor where it's you have to also recognize that you are behind this change. As therapists, we're here to guide you. I always like to say, I'm here to show you a beautiful buffet of foods and you get to pick and choose what you like, and we figure out what you do like, what you don't like, and we start catering to your needs. But to do that, we have to be willing to try and fail certain stuff. So I think there's an aspect of accountability that comes from not only the therapist end, but also the client.
Absolutely. So we are just going to take a quick sponsored break and we will be right back. This episode is brought to you by Thomas Sweet Ice Cream and Chocolate. Thomas Sweet is a locally owned business with over 45 years of experience serving custom ice cream creations and delectable chocolates. They are known for their blend-in ice creams where there are endless options to create your own ice cream treat with customizable topping mix-ins. Stop into the Thomas Sweet Ice Cream Shop located at 183 Nassau Street, Princeton, New Jersey, or contact them at 609-683-8720 or reach them at www.thomassweet.com. Now back to our episode. All right, and we're back. So segueing off of that, why is trust so essential for healthy relationships?
Well, I mean, trust is a really, I think, it's one of those things that is very, I think, difficult to define in a relationship. But when we talk about a healthy relationship, it's everything. It's what creates, I think, the ability to be vulnerable with a partner. It allows open dialogue and communication and expectations. And to have healthy trust, you have to really define and ask yourself, what are you looking for from your partner? Meaning, what does trust look like for you individually? in a healthy relationship. So does that mean it's somebody that can hold my secrets all the time? Does it mean it's just somebody that I know is going to always kind of check in with me and we feel like there's a healthy balance that's happening in the relationship? So trust looks different, I think, for so many people, but I think it's something more natural that you'll feel when you're in the relationship because you'll be able to tell, I think, really quickly if the trust is healthy or if it feels controlling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it'd be different if like your partner is like, every day I need to check your phone and every day I need to see your location. And like all of a sudden these very intense behaviors, we're going to say like, hey, that's not trust. That's not healthy. That's very toxic. So you want to really think about, can I be vulnerable with my person? Can they hold certain things about who I am? I always say like, when you think about your partner, and I give this visual to a lot of my couples, which is like, if you're gonna hold the heart of your person in your hands, how are you gonna hold it? Is it gonna be gently, or are you gonna like squeeze it and like throw it on the floor, right? Like you have to understand when you have trust, it's very easily broken. And you have to hold that person's heart, their secrets, the things they say to you, the vulnerabilities that they share as such. It's a very caring practice. So there's a lot of empathy involved, but to have trust in a healthy relationship is the foundation for not only, I'd say, a successful for a relationship, but the longevity as well, because you'll be able to tackle, I think, a lot of conflicts and problems that arise with trust because you're
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate with that person.
Mm-hmm. And how does trust impact communication and conflict resolution?
Well, the thing is, if you don't trust your partner, conflicts are probably going to be always really, I think, like high and intense. So if there's no trust there, you're not probably even focusing on the conflict. You're just kind of trying to find out who's right or wrong or who's hiding a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in that situation, it's really tense and you can't even focus in on like, wait, hold on. What's our actual conflict here? What do we want to resolve? And what's the expectation moving forward? We're not even focusing in on that. So if there's no trust, you're probably like, are you telling the truth? Let me see your phone. Who are you talking to? That's not even what happened. I heard it from this person, that person. Because if there's no foundation of trust, everything else I think gets really messy and convoluted. And it's really difficult to see anything else besides, I would say, like white lies.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really focus in on anything else.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, even when those types of conversations happen, it may bring up other things. Well, last week you said this and we had that argument about that. And a month ago you did this. Or do you remember last year when you did this too? And it's like, okay, what was the conflict that we were even starting with?
Yeah,
like, how
exactly.
did this lead into all of this?
Because that just shows that the trust obviously in a relationship has been broken either so many times and it was never actually resolved. So then now not only have broken trust in a relationship, now you have resentment towards your partner. So now you're bringing up things from like maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago and you're not even settling anything. And it's hard for you to even have a productive conversation about a conflict because all you're feeling is things from the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really difficult to navigate any kind of relationship without trust.
And I think even too, you bringing up those things that happened in the past, what happened in between those situations? Did you just kind of brush it off? Did you not say anything? Because there's, again, two people part of a relationship. If there's something that does happen, you should be able to, or there's something that does upset you, you should be able to tell your partner, hey, that kind of made me feel a type of way, that made me upset. And by you just swallowing that, that ends up causing more problems down the line.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about when trust gets broken in a relationship, there has to be an aspect of accountability from the other person, right? And transparency of recognizing, yes, I did lie. Is the person being accountable that they lied to you, right? That's the first thing. Or two, are they kind of just like pretending, oh, wasn't that big a deal? It was a small lie, get over it kind of thing. How is your partner reacting to kind of, I'll say like the breach that happened, right? Like what's happening here? So I think that gives somebody clarity and insight of, can I really trust this person? So let's play devil's advocate, right? Let's say they can't take accountability. There's transparency. I did lie. I'm so sorry I hurt you. Now what do we do with this, right? Now you just have this big elephant in the room and it feels really, really heavy. And now you're trying to figure out, what do I do? Now I'm so hurt. So the thing is, you have to be able to talk about the situation with your partner objectively in a clear way where it's not like, I'm going to say we're using it to constantly put the other person down. Just objectively, you said this, you did that, and this is why I'm feeling this way. Now moving forward, if you're choosing to stay with somebody who I say deliberately lied to you or chose to lie to you, or if there's infidelity involved, any of these things I think that come up, you're choosing now to stay. So if you're choosing to stay, you're going to have to choose to learn to trust, which means you have to take the time to do so. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think people get frustrated with that. But the thing is, now you have to really do the inner work is how do now I allow my vulnerability back into this person's hand? 1, 2, what do I need from this person moving forward? What are the expectations? Meaning, do I have to tell my partner like, hey, moving forward, these are the things I'll need to feel like I can trust you. And when I say that, I say trust enacting behaviors, which means these are behaviors that you can actually see from your partner that is slowly adding to the trust bank. And that takes time. And those things can look different for everybody and in the relationship, but you want to make sure those things are balanced, right? So maybe if we're talking about infidelity, it's like from moving forward, I need more transparency that if you're going to be out late at night, please check in by 6 p.m. Let me know if you'll be home by like 8:30. And if you're not home by 8:30, you're staying out later, please let me know by 9 p.m., right? Like you are now for yourself checking in with what you need for expectations moving forward. All those things look different for every relationship. But the thing is about choosing to stay in a relationship with broken trust, you have to, I truly believe you have to set the expectation moving forward because we don't know. You might get hurt again. You might not. But, and as like a therapist, I always tell my couples, it's like, I can't predict that. But what we can do is we can set kind of clear, concise boundaries moving forward. And now both parties are aware of what that looks like. So if the person who I'll say like committed infidelity, right, did it again, and that boundary was already set that you said, if this happens again, I'm done and out, that's your boundary. And that person knew that. So they chose to still maybe step out of the relationship knowing that we were working on this and your boundary might be this relationship might be over. So there's a lot of, I say, finagling when it comes to rebuilding the trust, but trust enacting behaviors are so important because you really need to start seeing and feeling that you can trust your person. And there has to be this aspect as well where it's like, you're not using the breach of trust, right, as a tool all the time. It's either you're going to have to choose, I moved through this, it happened, but I can't keep throwing it in my partner's face either. Because if we're going to continue to throw it in your partner's face, you're not choosing to move forward either. And I'm not saying you're not allowed to feel hurt and upset and angry. Absolutely you are. But now what are you going to do with that? Because again, if you're choosing to stay, you're choosing to know that that happened in the past. And now I need to move through it. And we're moving through it by setting expectations about behaviors now moving forward in the present.
You know, we went off of the example of infidelity. If we continue with that example, so if one partner commits infidelity, what happens to trust with the other partner when that is now missing in their relationship, and how can that affect that person's well-being?
Well, I mean, it's really isolating. When I work with couples, I think that experience infidelity, there is a lot of confusion that happens. But I think the biggest thing for someone to recognize who might be going through this and maybe like listening to this, if they're dealing with infidelity, is that their choice to step out or cheat or lie is not a reflection of you and your worth. Because there's so much attached, I think, today that if my partner thought I was worthy, they wouldn't do this. And if my partner thought this of me, they wouldn't do that. Like, I think it just goes deeper than that.
And I feel like that even brings up like feelings of loneliness. So do you have any advice for those who are experiencing feeling lonely, specifically around Valentine's Day? If you are feeling lonely today, what can someone do to make themselves, I guess, feel better, specifically if they are having these issues of trust?
Like 2 things come to my mind, right? Like piggybacking off of what you said about feeling lonely with infidelity. I think that, again, it's difficult. It's really, really hard. And so there's choices that have to be made. Are we going to go to couples counseling and work on this? Do I need to gain clarity and insight of what if I want to stay? There's a lot of factors why people do stay. And there's no, I'm going to say, right or wrong reason. It's more so about you yourself in that situation, recognizing what this looks like to build further. And I think it's really important that the person recognizes that they're going to probably feel a little lonely, and how to help, I say, combat that, which would be to really, I think, tune into themselves, which means either, I mean, you can find support, right? You have to find support, have your own therapist, get involved in those ways. But when you're dealing with something like this, internally, you just feel, I think, really lost and off balance. So I think it's really important to find a way to ground yourself and really ask, what is it that I need from this person? Take the emotions out of it. I love feelings and I love emotions, but when it comes to situations like this, we become emotionally driven and make emotional choices. And so when we make emotional choices, sometimes we're not making, I think, the right choice for the relationship. So I think it's really important to step back and you can say, yes, I love this person. I love them. We have children. We built a family. We built a life. I understand. And those are all huge. Those are not easy things to decide. But the thing is, if we can take sometimes emotions out of it and we can act a little bit more logically, can I objectively look at this situation, objectively look at this person, their patterns, their behaviors, their personality, that they're going to change? Are they willing to change? Are they willing to work on it? Are you willing to work on it? Are you willing to be okay that you're going to have to probably live with that feeling for a very long time? I'm not saying you can't get through it. You can get through it, but it's going to be a lot of work. And people think that it's going to be this, like, we go to therapy for 3 times, we're just going to feel magically better. And when dealing with that, the other partner who said, like, maybe committed the act of infidelity has to recognize there needs to be space of open communication, which is difficult. Which means if there's a day that your partner is having ruminating thoughts, or they're kind of off and they're thinking about it, or maybe a text pops up and all of a sudden they're triggered, you have to be able now to create a space where you can say that to your partner. That doesn't mean we have to bring up the elephant in the room again. We don't have to hash out the infidelity, all the details, but you have to be able to now slowly start telling your partner, hey, I'm having a bad day. I'm thinking about the thing, and you can call it whatever you want, and I just need a moment. Now your partner needs to also be able there to ground you and say something super simple. It doesn't have, there's not going to be a solution, but for your partner to look you in the eye and be like, I know and I'm sorry. I know you're hurting. Because that allows now that person is feeling validated in their feelings and that they're not kind of going crazy with it. Because when that happens, infidelity, I think a lot of couples try to like bury it away, and then it becomes so like tense, and then the other person's so like lonely inside their thoughts. But it's like, how different would that would feel? Like, it's going to be uncomfortable, but you're saying, hey, I'm having a bad day. It's one of those days. And then your partner is going to have to be like, I'm sorry. I know you're hurting. Is there anything I can do? If not, okay, I'm sorry. I'm here if you need me, right? Like those small, simple words to help rebuild are possible. But again, it comes to the mindset, and it also comes to what you two want together. And that is all very, I think, dependent on the couple at hand. Yeah. But when it comes to Valentine's Day, which is, I think, I love Valentine's Day. And it's one or two things, right? Because I think we have to ask ourselves, are we actually lonely, or are we made to feel lonely for Valentine's Day? Because there's so much stuff like TikTok and these like baskets that you make, and like, did they ask you to be your Valentine, and the flowers and all of this stuff? But like, I love any reason to celebrate love, but you have to really take a step back and say, hey, like, are all these things really what love is? Because I'll be honest, like, they're nice gestures and they're beautiful things, but that's not what love is. Love is shown every other day besides February 14th. And February 14th isn't just for lovers, it's for love. So love can be self-love. It can be going out with your girlfriends or your guy friends. It could be you just ignoring the whole day and not even caring about it, right? Like, you can celebrate how you want to celebrate, but really ask yourself, what does it feel like to be lonely? Because I think loneliness, and then Valentine's Day comes along and now we feel pressured that we have to have somebody, is two different things. So I would say really check in with yourself and recognize, like, it's just a day, and it's a day that I understand brings up a lot of emotions and feelings, but you really have to ask yourself, like, what love really is. Because I don't know about you, but like, I want love to be shown in my relationship like 365 days of the year, not just like Valentine's Day. So I think it's just become maybe a little bit overdone. Maybe social media gets into our heads and what people are saying in the movies and all of this stuff. But I always like to say, ground yourself sometimes in the facts, not the feelings. Our feelings can take over so much, and we get stuck in them. And with those feelings, that's how we kind of, I say, like, spiral with our anxiety. But sometimes we have to just take a breath and be like, what are the facts here? Okay, social media is a component. I would maybe really like to have a partner. I don't have a partner, but how great it will feel when I do have that partner who truly cares about me every day of the year, right? So again, when you ask yourself this Valentine's Day, like, if you're lonely, really ask yourself, is it about you or everything else that you're ingesting and surrounding yourself with? Because you can celebrate love every day. It doesn't have to be in a romantic relationship. Love can be in all forms and aspects. And I think maybe we need to like rebrand it. Maybe we have to like change it up a little bit, because I think it just becomes very apparent that it's supposed to be about couples, and it can just be, I don't know, show love the way you want to show it for yourself, for others around you.
I think one thing that I loved that you mentioned triggered something in my head, and one of the things that came up is there's a huge difference between being alone and being lonely.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that just because you're alone in a room doesn't mean that you're lonely. But in the same sense, just because you're with a partner or just because you're, out to dinner in a room full of people doesn't mean that you still don't feel alone.
Exactly. And that's a big point too in like a relationship situation, which is like, you need to also learn to be comfortable with being alone, because if you're not comfortable with yourself being alone and being okay during those seasons when maybe you don't have a partner, you're not in a relationship, it might feel very difficult to be in a relationship, because maybe you'll start really relying on that person all the time. You don't know how to be by yourself. You're kind of relying on them for certain things, and we want to rely on our partner for certain things, but there's a healthy balance. And I think it's really important for somebody to recognize, do I feel lonely or am I alone? And the idea of do I feel lonely kind of comes into play. Well, let me ask you, like, what brings up those feelings, right? What does it mean to be quote unquote lonely? Do I have no support system? I feel like no friends? Do I feel like I don't have anybody to talk to? I don't have any good relationships. It's difficult for me to, find a core group of people. Maybe then we are feeling lonely. Maybe it's somebody who has difficult times creating those like interpersonal relationships or having them, because a lot of the times you could just be lonely and needing to find that fit. So that's something to think about. But if you're navigating this idea of needing somebody in a relationship to not feel alone, I think that's just like a mistake. Because you need to have a level, I say, of confidence in yourself, security in yourself to be in a relationship. And if you're not self-assured, confident in who you are, those insecurities will show in your relationship. And that's fine. Those are things to work on. But I think it's just something more so internally for you to think about when you are approaching a relationship.
Absolutely. So these are definitely all things to keep in mind when getting into a relationship. But we will be right back after this quick sponsored break. Today's episode is brought to you by Tree of Life Counseling Center, where people come to heal, deal, and learn to thrive. They currently have immediate availability for talk therapy and medication management with a team of over 50 licensed clinicians. Are you feeling alone? We all can use someone to talk to. Call 732-393-8391 or visit us at www.treeoflifecc.org to start your journey of self-discovery and healing today. All right. And we're back. So what are some signs that trust might be lacking in a relationship? And what are some things that people can do if they recognize that their relationship is going through something like this?
I would say insecurities or even like excessive like being jealous all the time. If that's coming up, controlling factors, right? If you feel like trust is lacking in your relationship, it means there's probably like a lot of conflict and tension that's going on in the dynamic. So meaning like certain conversations or easy answers and questions are all of a sudden being very, I'm going to say like defensive, and you're feeling like you have to kind of defend whatever is happening. So I think it's really important to kind of recognize those patterns and behaviors, not only in your partner, but in yourself too. Again, couples work is also saying, I'm not just pointing the finger at my partner. What's kind of happening here too? Am I exhibiting any of these behaviors? Am I doing something that might make my partner feel like I'm controlling or there's a lack of trust? And if there is a lack of trust, if these behaviors are present, what are we going to do about them? And it's about having that conversation together. But again, it's so difficult because every couple I meet, it's so funny. They're just like, we're so great. We just need to communicate better. And I'm like, well, communication's like one of the top things. So what do you mean you need to communicate better, right? Like, what does communication look like? Because more times than none, there's two people who are trying to express their feelings, but no one's actually hearing one another. It's like, I'm just talking at you, and then you don't hear anything I say. And now I'm going to talk at you now with my feelings. And so in this kind of dynamic, when we're talking about trust and worried if it's there or not, it might be a sign for you to like maybe go to couples therapy, have that third party there to kind of help, I say, balance it out, to kind of point out those kind of patterns and behaviors in a setting where it kind of won't go in a spiral. Because if your partner, I feel like, is defensive when you bring up certain concerns, I feel like that's kind of right there's like a little bit of a sign of saying, hey, defensiveness is fine. We all get defensive. We all, we don't want to be blamed for anything. But after that defensiveness, if there's reflection that they want to work on these patterns and behaviors with you, that's great. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, we're all humans. We're all going to have reactions in certain ways. No one's going to react perfectly, but it's all about, again, afterwards, after maybe that defensiveness response, that emotional response, are you willing to sit with me and work out and be like, hey, this kind of is making me feel uncomfortable. This makes me feel like I can't trust you. And this is kind of what I need from you.
Mhm.
And kind of being really assertive with your needs, your goals, your expectations from a partner. Because I think a big thing about couples is a lot of people compromise their morals and values for each other. And when you compromise those things, are you even really compatible, to be honest? And I think that's kind of like the hard truth. Like, if I have to change everything about me to be with you, are we really compatible?
Mhm.
And, I think there's a lot to be said about that, really thinking about your non-negotiables in a relationship. And I always say, like, what are like the top 3-4 things that you absolutely need in a relationship that you can't falter on?
Mhm.
Because those things are important. Those are things that you, from like now to like 10 years from now, are going to always hold true to yourself. But then what are the things that you recognize in your partner? You're like, listen, everybody has a personality trait that it's like, ugh, that's just who they are, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like, oh, okay, it is what it is. Like I always say, like, sometimes, you have socks on the floor from your partner. Like, okay, like it's not a big deal, right? There's certain things and like stuff like that. Those are the small things. But what are the big things that are your non-negotiables in a relationship? And if trust is one of those things and they broke your trust and you don't feel comfortable or confident to work through it, you're allowed to leave.
Mhm.
You don't, and vulnerability is a gift. Not everyone deserves that vulnerability. And if someone takes that and kind of, I'm going to say, drops the ball on it, or takes your heart and like throws it on the ground, is there room for forgiveness? Absolutely. Of course there is. But I think there has to be more power and confidence in ourselves in a relationship to recognize and to be true to our own feelings of, do I really want to stay?
Mhm.
Do I really want to be in this relationship? Am I able to move past the infidelity? Am I able to move past the distrust? Whatever that looks like. And if the answer is no, and you're going to hold on to that for like years and years and years, then maybe you have to kind of second guess, or you have to really rethink, do I want to be in this relationship? And that's, again, these are not easy things, but it's real. And I think it's really important for people to be honest with themselves. And I think honesty right now, when it comes to relationships, is not there. We're always just trying to avoid feeling hurt
Mhm.
or hurting somebody else. Obviously, we don't want to hurt someone else, but someone's feelings at times are going to get hurt. And I think us trying to protect ourselves so much in a relationship dynamic ends up being like, we end up being hurt anyway.
Mhm.
So it's like, why not communicate your needs, your goals, your non-negotiables? It's crazy. I feel like we're afraid to like tell people what we need and what we want. Like, that's
we think that we're not allowed to do those
yeah,
things.
we feel like we're like, oh, we're too much. We're just too much. I can't tell him that. I can't tell her that. I'm just too much. And it's like, where does this come from? Like,
Mhm.
why are you too much? It's important to express these things, because if they can't meet those things, or they say no, or they don't align with your morals and values, okay, next. Like, this is
Mhm.
dating. Like, then maybe they're not your person, So I think it's really important to kind of check in with yourself there, of recognizing, like, where am I in this moral ground when it comes to
Mhm.
trust and infidelity or cheating? And it doesn't have to always be cheating, right? It could be these like little lies that add up. It's still a breach in trust, right? So those are things and factors you have to think about. Are these patterns and behaviors in my partner that I feel like innately can change? Or is this a personality thing? Because I tell people all the time, we can work on habits and behaviors and changing those things, but a personality most of the time is a personality.
Mhm.
And that might not change.
Recognizing like all of these patterns,
Mhm.
recognizing these behaviors, those are things that most of the time they are always still there at the beginning when you first meet the person. So how can couples recognize these patterns early on and address them, rather than them waiting like 3 or 4 years into the relationship and then being like, oh, well, you do this thing and it's always bothered me, but I've never said anything.
And I think that's the biggest thing, because there's like a stigma where I think it comes to couples therapy, meaning that you only go to couples therapy when like the house is burning down.
Mm-hmm.
And like, or if you say you're in couples therapy, oh my God, your relationship's a mess. And oh my God, they're never going to make it. And I hate that, because like I've had clients and couples from all different types of backgrounds with relationships, people that truly just come in because they're like, hey, we love each other, nothing crazy has happened, but we're just noticing this pattern. We are consistently not communicating well about this topic. And it's kind of just like this roller coaster over and over again. So I think it's really important that people kind of remove that stigma. And I think that, because I've noticed it a lot of the couples, it's just like, oh, well, now we're here in couples therapy. If we weren't here, I don't know, like if we were happy, we wouldn't be here. But it's like, you could still be happy and go to couples therapy. Everybody's goals are different. And everybody's need for couple therapy is different, but I think the stigma surrounding it at times prevents couples from coming into couples therapy. So if I can say anything as a clinician, it's like, if you feel like there's something that you've tried together to work on, you've tried over and over again together to like settle that conflict, and it's just not working, maybe visit couples. Because it could just be you need that third party perspective to help bring you guys back down. Remember, when it's like two people in love or you're in a relationship, there's a lot of emotions. It's heightened. You can't see anything else besides sometimes just wanting to be right. So you can just take out that tension for yourself and have somebody else, like a therapist, be there for you to support you on that journey. But I think the biggest thing is like, there does hit a point at times where I feel like it is too late, and couples usually recognize that. But I don't know. I always say at least give it a shot, because even if you last like three sessions, you're gaining some kind of insight and clarity. So it's hard for me to sit here and objectively be like, well, if this happens, it's done. You can't go to couples. That's not fair, because you have to really go in together and see like, okay, maybe things have really exploded and now we are ready to go. And maybe you just needed that space to really vent it all out and work with someone else to kind of sort all those things. So I think the biggest takeaway though is like, the stigma of couples therapy, you can just go and still be in a healthy relationship and work on things. I think that's really important.
So if there's a couple listening right now and they are resonating with a lot of the things that you are saying, what key steps would you give them to help them rebuild a healthy relationship that has a healthy trust in it?
I would say there's two things that really come to mind, right? Which is, I'm going to say, one is accountability, right? And truly honesty and transparency about whatever the breach of trust was. So it's really that person sitting down and saying, yeah, I did X, Y, and Z. This is what I did. And, I'm so sorry. And, how can I make it better? There has to be a person in the dynamic, though, both of you together, again, willing to want to work on it. It can't be, again, this kind of back and forth where it's only one person who's like, you did me wrong and you broke my trust. And they're kind of like, yeah, I did do that, but like, it's not that big of a deal. Or like, okay, I won't do it again. Those things lead to more, I would say, frustration, resentment, more lack of trust, right? You really are just probably going to have behaviors that are kind of facilitating the side of like you feeling on edge of what they're doing, trying to see all the stuff they're trying to kind of hide from you. So I would really first say is transparency and honesty about what has happened. That's definitely the first step of having that open communication. Both of you having the mindset of, we need to do better. So if we're going to do better, what does that look like? And that might mean the person who experienced the breach of trust says, hey, moving forward, this is what I need from you. You're setting clear expectations, because when we set clear expectations in a relationship, your partner can come back to you and be like, you never said that. I didn't know about that. Like, well, I did it again and you forgave me the first time, but now this is different. So clear expectations. Trust in acting behaviors if you're choosing to stay. What does that look like? Maybe more transparent communication. Maybe it's more check-ins throughout the day, more intentional conversations. We say we talk to our partners, but do we really actually talk and listen to them? And when I say like check-ins, I mean like put an alarm on your phone for 20 minutes and sit and have an intentional dialogue about your day, how you're feeling. Or also check in with each other. How are we doing in our relationship? Is there anything I can improve on? Is there anything you can improve on? And this isn't meant to be this like back to back, like, pointing fingers like you're so terrible, you're horrible. It's truly about you two building something together. And to build something together, there has to be transparency, but also there has to be like no egos in the way. And that means like you both kind of let your guard down and that vulnerability exists. But then you're like, how can I be vulnerable if they broke my trust? Great question. The thing about that is we're choosing now to rebuild, which means now we're choosing to put ourselves in a situation that might hurt us again, which is very scary, but you can't avoid that hurt because now you already know that I'm going to set expectations moving forward. That if my partner were to do X, Y, and Z again, this is how we're going to handle it. It doesn't mean it's always like the relationship ends. You will find those things that feel innate to your relationship. But it starts with transparency, honesty, accountability, apologizing, and truly moving forward with the expectations of what we need to rebuild trust, what those behaviors look like for each person, and each person willing to step up to the plate to do those things, not just saying them, but actually doing them and checking in with each other and doing them. So there's a lot of work that happens. It is 100% possible. Absolutely. It just takes time. And you have to be open to knowing that it's not going to be a quick fix and it's going to be really difficult. And you're going to probably have a lot of emotions and sadness. And those are the times that I tell my couples that you have to reconnect when you're having those doubts.
So if you're listening to this episode, there's definitely a lot to kind of take from that. So I think the first thing to recognize is if there is broken trust in your relationship, it is only going to be harder for your relationship to move forward, especially if your partner is not willing to work with you to rebuild that trust. You can't be in a relationship by yourself. So if you're the only one working on something, you can work on it and try to do as much as you can yourself, but it's never going to get better if your partner is not willing to give in. Or you need to make a hard decision of, do you want to continue with this person moving forward?
And you know, my mom gave me the best analogy, and I just, from when I was really young and when I was in so much heartbreak and I thought I'd never find love and I was always the person giving, wanting to change. Let's work on this. And I was always feeling like I was, you know, met with someone else who just didn't want to work on it. And she would say to me, she's like, love is a box. You put something in, your partner puts something in. You put something in, your partner puts something in. She goes, but if you keep putting in and someone keeps taking out, you're going to get exhausted refilling the love box. It has to be an effort on both sides. So ask yourself, are you the only one putting into the love box? Are you the only one putting in the effort? Are you the only one fighting for it? It can't just be on your own. And if you are seeing that that is the pattern behavior, it might not be the relationship for you. And that might be really hard to hear, but that's kind of the truth. If you tried everything possible and you're still giving, and they're not giving an ounce back and they're not caring about your emotional needs, why are we in the relationship? So think about it. Love is a box. You put something in, someone else puts it in. You can't fill it up by yourself.
And that's like the glass half full analogy. If you're going to fill your cup,
absolutely.
You can't fill your cup to then take your cup and fill up someone else's cup. You have to make sure that you're able to fill your cup and make sure that your cup is actually filled before giving to somebody else.
I mean, I think couples work is my favorite work, but there's so much beauty that can come from it. There's so much pain that happens there, but there's so much healing that can really take flight. And it just, again, it's about entrusting the process. You two and your partner having the same mindset. We want to work on it. If that's anything you take away from this, if we want to go to couples, we just want to work on it. We might not know what the end result is, but we're willing to try. And if you're willing to try in a couple setting, you'll probably gain more clarity than you would probably on your own, trying to like ask your friend for advice or what should I do, or kind of let the same patterns and behaviors fly by, right? If something doesn't feel right, it's not right. So if it's not right, don't ignore it. Use your voice. Talk about it. You deserve to have the love that you want. You deserve to feel good in a relationship. You shouldn't feel isolated. You shouldn't feel sad all the time. It makes me feel sad when I notice that people feel so isolated in a relationship. You can have the love you want. You just have to put the work into it. And you have to also know that you deserve that love. And I think some people think that they might not deserve it. And that's a big problem.
And not only do they deserve that love, but I think another thing that the listeners need to make sure that they remind themselves is if you are in a situation like this, nothing gets better or nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah. If nothing is being said, meaning like you're not going to be honest with yourself or your partner, if they don't know, they don't know. So when I say that, it's like, well, have you ever told your partner that you hated when they, you know, leave the cabinet doors open all the time, or you're just going every day slamming the doors, being really passive aggressive? Oh, no, I never said anything. well, maybe you should try saying something first.
They can't read your mind.
Yeah, right? Like I always say, your partner can't read your mind. And there's this thing today, I think, with dating and couples where it's like, well, if they love you, they should know. They should know what to do. They should know how to treat me. They should know how to do this. They should know how to do that. But the truth is they're not going to. And that doesn't mean that someone loves you less, because you have to say, hey, I saw something and it made me feel like this. And I actually never communicated to you, but I actually need this. Can that person now meet that need? Now you're learning not only more about yourself in a relationship, but them. Is this the right partner for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important, because your partner can't read your mind. They don't know all the time how you're feeling. We're all so different. You're not going to think the way your partner thinks. So you need to use your voice and communicate. You need to be able to say these things. And I understand that's scary, but I think that there's so much growth for not only you two as a couple together, but you individually, because we're so afraid of rejection. But I'd rather be rejected than feel lonely in a relationship, because that kind of goes back to our idea of loneliness. How lonely and isolating would it feel to not say anything to your partner about how you're truly feeling and just pretend that everything is fine or the behaviors they're doing is okay when they're actually hurting you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Demi, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming on today's episode.
Thanks so much.
I would like to ask you one more question before we end. So, do you have any parting words, any final thoughts that you would give to our listeners if they are in a relationship where they had trust issues or had things have broken in the past? What are your last words?
I have a lot of things to say, but I'll try to keep it short. But the thing I just want most people to take away, or couples or an individual who's listening to this, who's in a relationship that they're doubting, is that you are allowed to feel uncertain and unsure and worried about things. And these are big choices and big decisions, but don't go against your morals and values. Don't go against who you innately are to please somebody else in a relationship if it's not going to be reciprocated on both ends. It's so important. We have one life to live. And I know this sounds so mushy and gushy, but I truly love love. And I truly believe that everybody can find the right person for them if they're willing to do the work and to be open and honest. So if you're feeling like a little defeated, if you're feeling curious about your relationship, open up conversations. And I know we're afraid again of being rejected, but again, wouldn't you rather know the answer versus constantly think about it over and over again? The what ifs, the what if, the what ifs. I say, if there's anything that you can take away from our conversation today, is that you are worth the love that you want, a healthy love, a beautiful love, a love that can withstand conflict, that can go through things. And it's truly, at the end of the day, a choice between you and your partner, how you work through those things. And I'm not here to say that you should leave or stay if someone cheats or does this or does that, because truly every relationship is defined differently. Everybody has different values, different rules, different things that feel good for them. So if anything, don't give up on love. Don't give up on feeling good in a relationship. Love is beautiful. Life is beautiful. And hang in there.
Well, thank you. And for the rest of the listeners, remember, trust isn't built overnight. And it's one of those most rewarding things that you can make in your relationship. So take one small step today and see where it leads. You never know where it may go. What were you going to say?
I was literally just going to be like, love is love. Love is beautiful. Don't just keep trekking through and allow yourself to experience the beauty that love is. Love is heartache. Love is pain. But love is also so beautiful. And sometimes we got to go through the icky stuff to find that person. So don't give up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And we will see you guys on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.